something. I mean, I think probably he was my closest friend in Nuremberg, and I might have been his closest friend.
Yeah.
And we were in daily contact. When Justice decided to go to Luxor for Christmas and his holidays,
Yeah.
the party was 8. It was the Justice, Secretary Elsie Douglas,
Yeah.
Bill, Gordon Dean, a girl by the name of Confederates was his secretary.
Yeah.
That made 5.
Yeah.
And then there was General Gill, 6, a guy by the name of me, 7, and a kid by the name of, what the hell's his name? I'll think of it. I'll think of it. He was in charge of the document room. Let's see, he's out in the Midwest, Iowa, somewhere. He was the 8th.
Yeah.
Nice guy. And so we were together all the time. I mean, he took care of me, Legion of Merit. I was I done an awful lot behind the scenes and active and everything else. And I was in on the Donovan-Jackson feud. And I was close to Donovan, but not as close, of course, to Jackson. But I was OSS, Schools and Training.
Oh, you were. Did you ever read a book called Piercing the Reich about the OSS and penetration of Nazi
Persico,
Germany?
right?
That's my book.
I know, I got it, I told you. Yeah, so, but anyway, I was in Schools and Training at headquarters.
Yeah.
So I went around taking care of all the training areas, improving. I done the banquet for the Jedburghs. I don't know if you knew about it when they came back.
Yeah, right.
And, of course, I didn't meet Jack. I met Donovan then.
Yep.
But very interesting story. You know, when he came at Nuremberg, I was shocked. I was supposed to put him up in San Francisco, and he didn't show during the conference. I set up everything for him. It didn't come. Some son of a gun out there squealed to Drew Pearson. He was a stool pigeon. Told him everything we had, and even stuff I didn't know we had.
Yeah.
But anyway, Bill was a tired, poor fellow. He had the biggest belly in America. I mean, I was shocked. I went to his house one night, and after he got settled, about 2 or 3 days after he came in, and Joe, his stomach was so stretched, I thought the guy would have been dead by the end of the year.
Well, what was the condition, John?
I mean, he was just sitting there. He had his shirt off, and his, he had a undershirt. He was just sitting in his chair. He was just blown up. I mean, I can tell you. I mean, I've never seen a bigger pot belly in a human being.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I knew he had a little pot belly from when I met him in the Congressional Country Club. You know, before that, for about 8 or 10 months before that.
Yeah.
But at Nuremberg, when he came in, and he was, of course, he had the biggest thing about it was the fact that he had to go. They were cutting down OSS, burying OSS. Remember?
Trying to kill it.
Closing out areas, and he was getting the short end of the stick from other people that were hostile to OSS.
Yeah.
And he was depressed, and I don't know, he just was depressed because they were not giving him a fair shake at Nuremberg. You see what I mean?
Right.
But of course, there's reasons for that too. You know, he couldn't stay there, and these other guys were bitching. There were 3 Kaplans, and every one of them were bitching because Donovan was going to steal the limelight, and they were doing the work. You understand? And there was just a lot of hostility built up. So just forced Jackson's hand, the split of the fact that he couldn't stay continuously from the beginning was basically. But the contribution of OSS and Donovan was immense. The biggest thing I got to tell you is also about this guy Andrus. And I'm going to give you some stuff on Andrus that you won't believe. I'll set the thing in proper perspective. He was the worst thing at Nuremberg. No. I'm serious.
Well, he lost 3 prisoners.
More than that, Joe. I mean, the guy was a bad guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he was ruthless. I mean, he was absent-minded. He was strange. He had bad morale. The whole goddamn bit.
Yeah.
You see, and I also knew this guy Wheelis. You know about Wheelis?
Wheelis is I know vaguely about him, but I don't know anything.
He's the guy that's now writing and saying that he passed him the cyanide.
Yeah.
Well, now Wheelis wound up with his medals, his watch, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
And he committed suicide, I guess, down in Texas.
Right.
But he was one of the guys. But he was not only. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff. The thing started from the first day. Before he got there, he was a bastard. In other words, what happened? There was a big meeting.
Right.
He wanted to bring 400 people in.
Yeah.
He was at Mondorf on the Main with an anti-aircraft battalion. And he was guarding the prisoners. He wanted to bring him into Nuremberg. We had to bring him in.
Right.
And he wanted to bring 400 some people in there.
Yeah.
The 1st Division put on the real bitch. Colonel Andrus, the general, and Corley and Murdoch. Murdoch was a 26th commander. Corley had 5 silver stars. They got a museum in part of Harmony Church area down at Fort Benning. This guy was a great hero. 5 silver stars. The only other man at the time had 5 was MacArthur.
Yeah.
took the surrender of Aachen. He's the guy that we dealt with on everything, administratively, housing, feeding, coordinating, everything at the beginning.
Right.
So they didn't want him to come in with that many because the city was overcrowded.
Yep.
You see, and this was early. This was mid-July in 45.
Right.
So General Gill calls me up. He was in a colonel from Paris, and I was the only one in Nuremberg. He said, look, Captain, I was in a captain. He says, make arrangements at the Grand Hotel for a room. We're going to have a meeting. This Colonel Andrus is coming up from Mondorf, and the First Division wants this meeting. We got to iron this thing out because quite an impasse has developed. So I did. He came in, and they were really hostile to him. I mean, they didn't want any part of him coming in with that number, you see?
Yeah.
So they all made their pitches, and I wound up, I precipitated the solution. I didn't know him then, but I did get up and said, after all, I said, please forgive me for wanting to add my 2 cents in, but it may be appropriate because my field is the housing aspect, hotel aspect of it. But I recommend that we let him come in because I think from your point of view, you've got a glorious division. You took the surrender of Aachen. You were heroic in Africa. You had the great Teddy Roosevelt with you. You lost him. And I said, I can see this only a no-win proposition. I didn't specify suicides. He wound up with 3 suicides. This guy was the worst. Now, here's what he did to me. This was a payoff now, what he did to me.
Yeah.
Inside of 3 weeks later, after the prisoners got there, Jackson landed with a party of 20 to make an inspection of Nuremberg from London while they were working on a charter. That was his first trip.
Yeah.
I think it was the first trip. It might have been the second. Anyway, the prisoners were there. They were in the courtroom, in the prison. I never went over there. I was afraid of the guy. I was suspicious of him.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'd done him this favor not for him because the circumstances required. So when I made that pitch, the meeting finished and we decided to let him come in. The decision by the general in the First Division, they backed off, you see, and let him come in. Nobody knows this story. So Gill is dead, and the rest of them would only be hearsay. Corley is dead, but Murdoch remembers. He's alive, and he's up here, lives near Sweetbriar up in the mountains here near Lynchburg. When I received Jackson and his party ragtag with some ragtag cars and brought him to Hotel 8, then he wanted to go on a tour of the courthouse and the prison. So when we got to the prison, Andrus met us. So I was bringing up the rear with Bill Jackson.
Right.
And I just met him one time, one day before at London when I came through from Washington. And I didn't know him very well. But I was bringing the rear up with Bill. Jackson was in the front. There must have been a span of about 20 yards. And I had a camera around my neck, a 35-millimeter Contax camera, OSS issued. And the thing was in a leather case closed, just hanging on my neck. Right. There were no signs of no pictures, no cameras, nothing allowed in the prison. Yeah. Suddenly the bastard swung around and he says, and you, Captain, have no business taking pictures in my jail. Damn bastard, I was embarrassed. So Bill said to me, he's a Boy Scout. Oh, Boy Scout, farty Boy Scout. So then, he was trying to make brownie points with Jackson, the old man, see? Yeah. So he said he's only trying to make brownie points with the old man. Don't pay no attention to him because the justice will see through it. I didn't know the justice very well then. So can you imagine now, here's a guy that does him a favor, brings him in, and then he turns around. So I never got near him. He'd done me 2 more dirty tricks after that. But I was wise, and every one of them, Jackson knew it. You know that he didn't get no Legion of Merit. He got no recognition. He was the GOAT. He had 3 suicides. I can't begin to tell you the troubles he had. At the beginning, Marguerite Higgins would go into the prison. None of the AP, UP, and the rest of them, Arthur Gaith, all of them, they were crabbing. Yeah. Because he wouldn't give them a shake on the news. And, he just passed it out to who he wanted to. Yeah. You see, so Marguerite would win. She was in the New York Herald Tribune. You know, the gal was thrown out of Korea. Yeah. You remember her, the one who was better.
I just looked. I saw a picture.
Beautiful chick.
Good-looking gal. I saw a picture the other day when she was there at Nuremberg.
Oh, she's a great gal. I put her up. She was the first guest that we put up in the Grand Hotel. Gorgeous girl. She came in half dragged around 11 o'clock one night. So, I know Margaret very well. Yeah. But she's a smart cookie. But she'd go in, lift her skirt all the way up to her hips and scoop it. Next day, the New York Herald Tribune would have a story. The other guys, Arthur Gaith and all the others, the 2 Daniels from New York Times, they couldn't get a story. They were bitching to me. I was the only guy they could talk to. Nobody else, everybody else was in London. So they were griping like hell. Yeah. And so it was very unfair. In the meantime, he had a drunken colonel. He had a hell of a morale problem. Just trouble from the beginning to the end. And he was just the worst guy in Nuremberg.
Did you know
now his son, he's a West Pointer, and so was the old man. But he never got promoted. They knew what he was. Or they would have promoted him, you see.
You said there were 2 other times when he did you dirty deals.
Oh, all right, that's 2. The other one, when we were leaving, I had the house, the original house that I gave Donovan.
Right.
When he left, there's a story about Donovan's departure. You know, they chased him to the airport. I mean, to the port of departure. They done him wrong.
Yeah.
He had a guy by the name of Wiener, the masseur that he traveled with.
Yeah.
You know about him?
Go ahead.
Anyway, they followed him at the airport. I was not involved. I found after the fact they said he took something from the house. After Donovan left, I gave the house to Tom Dodd.
Yeah.
Tom Dodd stayed in there. Donovan left, I guess, before the trial started. I guess the tail end of October, sometime like that. For good, he vacated the house, and we put Tom Dodd in. You know, the present senator's son.
Right, Chris Dodd's father.
What's that? Yeah, his father, Tom. Very nice guy, and really very useful to the trial. So we put him in because he was going to stay and hang on, and so Donovan was leaving, and then when we were all leaving at the end of the trial and the end of the prosecution was about the end of August, I think. Am I right? Or July? I forget when I get one or the other anyway. End of July or August, whenever we were leaving. I think
it's around July, yeah.
July, the 30th, 31st, something like that. We flew back, the first flight from Nuremberg to Washington directly. Anyway, we stopped off the Paris Peace Conference. So anyway, Dodd left with us, and so Andrus came to me, and listen to this bastard. So he said, listen, and I had nothing to do with the guy. He avoided me, and I avoided him, so I was sorry. He came to my office.
Yeah.
So he says, Major, I was in a major. He says, look, he says, I'm bringing my wife over. She's not feeling the best, but I feel that I want to bring her over, and I want to have something comfortable. And I seen Tom Dodd's house, and I think that would be very just would suit my needs perfectly. I would like to have it. He says, if nobody's ahead of me. Well, I said, I've had some inquiries. I've made no resolution on it. I haven't gotten through talking to the justice or anybody else on it. The general guilt. But I says, I certainly have to consider you, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I said, look, Bert, you haven't been very good to me, like that, Colonel. Oh, he bitched because I didn't salute him, a couple other things like that. I wasn't going to salute that guy. I never went to the jail after the first time. I suspected him. I told everybody there was something wrong with him.
Yeah.
And I was right. So anyway, he wanted his house, and I told him, well, I said, I won't say no, I won't say yes. But while we're at it, I said, why have you been so bad to me all along? And furthermore, I said, I understand a lot of guys are getting autographed, you know, the defendant's autographs.
Yeah.
With on a paper. I certified this is my authentic signature.
Yeah.
And I said, you're letting other people have them. And I said, nobody brought me anybody. He said, I'll take care of you. I said, all right, you go ahead and give me 3 copies of them. And what does the bastard do? And he gets them ready.
Yeah.
So he, instead of bringing them to me, he brought them to Gill, the General Gill, who was the executive officer.
Right.
And instead of giving them to me, you see. So Gill got them, and Gill panicked. Well, I knew how to handle that. I was smarter than all of them. I got the damn order. I got them. But just to show you what a bastard he was. In other words, he made his deal with me. I gave him his house,
Yeah.
everything, and instead of bringing me the autographs, every GI and his brother had them. He got them. He had the thing. He's the guy that made the mimeograph form that was in English and French, and I think it's French, and certainly in German. I got them anyway. I got one set. I gave the other 2 away. And he said that I certified this my authentic signature, and all of them signed it, you understand? So he had each individual one. So, in other words, here he made his deal, and he double-crossed me at the end. I got him. But he was just a bad guy, and he deserved all the trouble he had.
Were there a lot of guys that wanted these autographs then?
All the GIs were getting them. They were no big thing. I had heard about it from a couple of guys.
Yeah.
My driver said that one of his friends got one. I said, well, I never wanted to ask him. I was going to ask him those times. There's no condition. I didn't need anything like that, but I just the kicks. I wouldn't have even asked him, except he came to the office. I wouldn't needle him, you know. But he did get them, but he didn't bring them to me. He brought them to my boss.
Evidently, these defendants didn't mind doing that. Didn't mind signing them.
I guess they probably had some reason to cooperate. I mean, every one of them signed them. I can show you a set.
We looked at, from what I've read so far and pictures I've seen, he looked like kind of a peacock in that fancy hat he had designed. And
yeah, he had that polished the helmets and so forth. And he was just when he was ass kissing everybody he could to become a general. That's what he was doing.
Yeah.
He had to be passed over. You realize this guy should have been a general 20 years before this?
Well, a West Point graduate that winds up, you know, as a colonel.
I mean, all these other guys were way ahead of him.
Yeah.
And this guy couldn't cut the mustard, and they knew him. And but then he's done everything. He'd trample anybody. He was ass-kissing Biddle, taking him to the opera. Was a judge.
Yeah.
You see, and of course that didn't set well with Jackson. He never complained publicly, but I know the score. I mean, they were very cynical of it. I'll give you an idea what happened. When they had the suicide of Dr. Lay,
right.
All right, Gordon Dean and I and General Gill and Guy Nimps just died. Great guy, Jay Nimps in South. He was a congressman in South Bend.
Yeah.
And anyway, we were living together and we were all in bed. So Dean had to get down. So he says, "Hey, John, how about keeping me company and ride down to prison?" I says, "Gordon, I won't go to that prison if you hang me." And the poor guy had to go alone. They sent a car to pick him up.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't go down. It was around 10 o'clock at night, I think it was, something like that, when Dr. Lake committed suicide. I wouldn't go down, and Gordon and I were very close.
Yeah.
I said, "Gordon, you can't get me to set foot in that prison." I just made up my mind. I was afraid of that man. I couldn't trust him. And I stayed the hell away from him, I'll tell you. And I was right. And he was just poisoned. By the name of Doris Stairt.
Oh, I've heard of him.
He was a translator. Now, he'd done some good work.
All right.
But
There's
he was he had a megalomaniac complex too. He wanted everything in a plus, but he didn't stay long. But he was very useful. But he was nuts. But I'll tell you about him. He got mad at me because I didn't give him a palace. So yeah, and of course, and one night one of his translators died. Listen to this story.
Yeah.
And so they took him to the hospital. And he died. So he goes in the morning all panicked. He gets a hold of this guy Gil. We all lived together, but I also kept my suite at the Grand Hotel because many nights I had to get down there. So I also had a suite continuously before the trial started, the whole year at the Grand Hotel also. So so in the morning I was at the Grand Hotel that night. I had to stay there, and so I guess some Russian archbishop come in or something. I think that's what happened, and so I had to receive those people and put them up at the hotel. And so anyway, what happened was that in the morning, the Doris Stairt found out this guy died, and so he went to General Gill's office next to Jackson and pitched the bitch and said that this Captain Vonetes is neglectful, he's derelict, and so forth, and this man died because there was no coal in the billets. So, in other words, we had about 40 or 50 guys that were translators or assistants and so forth live in this one house, apartment house like so. But one time they were a little late getting the coal there, the first division, but even so, it's not my job. I mean, I couldn't take care of heating every billet. I mean, but if it came to my attention, we certainly followed it up. But what happened was that my secretary was there, and she says, "Captain, you better get down here. All hell is breaking loose." That's what's the matter. Well, he says, "A man died at the billet, and they're blaming you for it." Colonel Doris Stairt here is bouncing up and down, and the general wants to dismiss you and everything. I said, "Well, let them do what they want. Let's see what happens." So I called the hospital right away, Nuremberg.
Yeah.
And got a hold of I think it was the colonel who was in charge, and I said, "Look, I understand a man died with spinal meningitis." He says, "You're right. Where'd you find out?" I said, "Well, they're blaming me for it, Colonel." I said, "Because he allegedly died because there's no coal in the billets, no heat." He says, "Nonsense, poppycock." He says, "Impossible. There's no connection." He says, "If he was in Alaska, that wouldn't have been the cause."
Yeah.
So I had no connection at all. So here's my guy. So I went down there got in, and I'm there in the meantime. Here he walks in my office with Doris Stairt, the two of them. My colonel, 6'3", later Secretary of Baltimore. He was a millionaire spinster, hell of a nice guy, really, basically. And this little short Doris Stairt, who's Eisenhower's French translator during the war, was in charge of setting up the translation. Done a very good job, by the way. And later in charge of languages at Georgetown University. He was no French-born guy, but really capable. So he's there and he's bitching a bitch. So this guy. So when he got through talking, he accused me right in front of the Gill, my secretary, saying that I was responsible. So I said, "Colonel, I said, it's asinine for you to say asinine." I said that a man dying from spinal meningitis that died because there was no heat in the billets. I said, "That's completely ridiculous." I said, "Asinine." So my general speaks up. My colonel then, he gets general later, Gill, he says, "Nobody over the rank of captain is asinine. You're relieved." So they fired me. Now listen to this. I'll tell you how dumb the general was, you see. So I said, well, meantime, my secretary calls up Bill Jackson. Justice Jackson says, the captain is packing his bags to leave him. And Bill says, "Look, no," he goes nowhere. So in the meantime, to show you how his thinking was, if I'd have been wrong, and they assumed that, I mean, when they're firing me, they're assuming your responsibility.
Yeah.
In other words, I was a staff officer to Jackson. How does he avoid it?
Yeah.
Well, Jackson saw through it right away. So he says, "Look, if the captain is wrong, we're all wrong." He says, "The whole staff." So he straightened out the general. I mean, Colonel Gill. I mean, he wised him up in a minute. So inside of an hour, I was reinstated with apologies. I mean, let's figure it out. Now, does it make any sense? They fire you before they find out the facts. This guy panicked. It's understandable that he'd panic, but my guy is a very capable guy. I mean, and he had no business panicking. He could fire me because I stood up for my rights. I had checked out. I didn't get through telling him that I had already been to the hospital. So when Jackson's office came by, I mean, he found out that I had already talked to the hospital and I had my facts, and So he straightened them all out because, look, he told them privately, he says, we don't want to get this any further, but if the captain is responsible, we're responsible. It just turns out that the man died for other reasons, and the proof is from the doctor at the hospital, so let's forget this thing. And Mr. Captain Vonetes is not going anywhere. He's agreed to stay. So to give you an idea of what these guys do, they get excited, you know,
Right.
They're characters. So I had an exciting time over it.
Tomorrow I'm going to be talking to a guy. He's a priest now, but at Nuremberg he was Jackson's bodyguard, I guess. His name was Maurice Fuchs.
Maurice Fuchs, yeah, nice guy. He was sort of a chauffeur bodyguard, yeah, nice guy. Yeah, he was with him all the time. I mean, we assigned him, and he rode in the Goering's car, I think, or in Ribbentrop's. I think it was Goering's Mercedes. He was a nice guy. Remind me to tell you about the story about the Russians' house where they didn't fail to invite Jackson by the October Revolution. Hell of a story there. There's so much. I got to make a note of that.
I'm writing that down.
Huh?
I'm writing that
That's
down.
the most important thing. They failed to invite him, and the Russian, it was a big mistake.
Yeah.
And he refused to go later, and I went there. They had to send me to get him, and Donovan and every big shot from all the nations were locked in a room for an hour, nothing to drink, and there's ice and snow. And they gave me a Russian general to take me to Dombach, about a 6-mile drive and 6 miles back. And I tried to coax Jackson, but he wouldn't budge. And so I went back, and then Rudenko, they started the dinner. And then the comedy of it, there was a lot of comedy afterwards. It was very sober. I mean, they were disappointed as hell, but I think they goofed. I don't know whether I don't think it was intentional. In the meantime, I had invited Bill because I knew he didn't get invited. He called me in the afternoon. I said, Bill, see you tonight to Russia. He's not going to see me. What do you mean Russia? He didn't know anything about it. So he didn't tell me that his father didn't get an invitation. So I got Bill an invitation, didn't get one for the old man because I didn't know the old man wasn't invited. They should have invited him direct.
Yeah.
But I wangled Bill an invitation. He and I went. The justice said, put on your brass knuckles when we left. It's a hell of a story.